associated with the head, and even more specifically, right there in the nasopharynx, that's roughly a 6-inch circle there, is where almost all of the abnormalities of the equine upper airway are going to occur. Okay? And if the horse is making a noise, it's because something is vibrating. So some structure in the airway is vibrating secondary to airflow going over it. And what we're going to do is look with the endoscope in the airway and try to identify what is actually making the noise. And one common culprit would be the vocal cords. This is a vocal cord you see here. You see how this one is pulled up nice and tight and away from the airway? The other one is paralyzed and is hanging down in the airway. So every time that horse breathes in, air hits that thing and makes it vibrate, and it makes a whistling sound. Okay? So when we try to diagnose upper airway problems, we usually try to ascertain the answers to 4 questions. We want to know, does the horse have good days and bad? Trying to determine, is it a fixed problem or is it something that comes and goes? How much exercise is required to make the horse make the noise? If the horse is making a noise at rest, it's a very severe obstruction. It will be very easy to find. If the horse only makes a noise at a gallop, then we're not likely to be successful in finding where the noise is coming from at resting endoscopy. And we're going to have to go to one of the dynamic systems, either the treadmill or the system that we're going to demonstrate here in just a few minutes. Also want to know, is the noise inspiratory, expiratory, or both? And will the noise come and go at the same intensity? And if we can answer those 4 questions with our exam and with our history, then we can almost always know which of these conditions that we're dealing with even before we ever start. Okay? And so we're going to start with our evaluating signalment history, physical exam, and then resting endoscopy. And approximately 90% of the horses, just those things will be enough to give us a diagnosis. But in the horses that those don't give us, we're going to have to do some sort of manipulation to make the horse make the noise. And so things that we can do to simulate exercise at rest, or we'll actually have to instrument the horse in making exercise. And the questions that we ask the owners, we have to phrase it different, because you'll have to phrase the question differently for a draft horse, hitch horse, versus a thoroughbred race horse, versus a standardbred or a pleasure horse. Okay? All right. So let's look at some of the conditions that we typically see. So laryngeal hemiplegia, so the horse's airway, so we're looking right here, this is the horse's trachea, and the opening to that trachea is guarded by these 2 arytenoid cartilages. Some horse people call them the flappers. And so, so this horse his right arytenoid is open, this left one is paralyzed and hanging down in the airway. So if we look at a normal horse, so what I'm going to do with this endoscope is looking at that larynx, and I'm going to squirt water on him and make him swallow, and you can see that he opens these up maximally. Every time he swallows, and then I can freeze frame it and see, yes, there is maximal abduction. Okay, that's a normal horse. Here's a horse that's completely paralyzed. And so we have his left side hanging down, his right side opening. You can see the vocal cord here is shorter and open. And when I make this horse swallow, well, we're squirting water with the endoscope. When I make him swallow, he's not going to open this side. It's a freeze frame. That side's open. That side doesn't change. So that horse is completely paralyzed. And so no further evaluation of that horse is necessary, because we already have a diagnosis. But not all horses present with a clean cut as that. So, you know, we have one that's completely normal, one that's completely paralyzed. This horse, watching, he opens his left one, but it immediately drops back down. So is that horse normal or not? he would be one that's going to require further evaluation. If we take him and put him on a treadmill or exercise him, he might be able to open them up all the way. Or what we might also see is that arachnoid cartilage, as he exercises and tries to hold open, those muscles will fatigue and it'll eventually collapse. So that horse requires further evaluation. And so here's one thing we can do is doing this at rest. I'm holding this horse's nose off to make him breathe harder, because what that does is it makes them generate negative inspiratory pressures equivalent to what a galloping horse would do. And when we hold his air off, we see he can open it some, but he can't open it all the way. Okay, so that's a horse that would, if we galloped him, would probably collapse. Another thing that we can do, what I'm doing is I'm taking my fingers right here, that's where the larynx is, and I'm pushing on one side versus the other. If you watch when I push on his left side, I can completely close his airway down. But when I push on the right side, the whole larynx moves over. So that proves he doesn't have enough muscular power to keep that left side open. So this is a horse that's a roarer. Next step we would do, if we're unable to ascertain by those, is I'm going to put this horse on a treadmill, and you can see the scope, the way the scope bounces on the treadmill, but that horse is unable to maximally open that. He can keep it about 80 or 90% open, but if he's able to do that for the duration that you'd want him to exercise, that would be adequate. Sometimes, though, they'll collapse as that muscle fatigues. And so treadmills are nice, but they're expensive to maintain, and some horses, it requires, it's not likely that you're going to take a thoroughbred racehorse and get him on the treadmill the same day. They require several days of acclimating to the treadmill. Standardbreds, you can almost always get them on the treadmill the same day. Draft horses will do it, but if they don't want to exercise, they'll burn up the motor. They can short out all the electronics. They have enough resistance to the motion. But the one thing that you see with this horse on the treadmill is they're pulling on the horse to keep him up, so they're keeping the head extended. And that may not be the condition under which the horse makes the noise during exercise. And so many of the horses are horses that require an erect headset. So our dressage horses, hackney horses, saddlebreds may only make a noise when they're in that position, and you're unable to replicate that on the treadmill. So that's where this dynamic endoscopy system comes in useful. So this is a system where, after scoping the horse at rest and examining everything, we can then instrument the horse with this to where the scope is in his nose, battery pack on the left side. This is the recording device with a SIM card in it. The horse so it's recording all the exercise video. And then here's the horse, and so there's the monitor that we're able to look at to ensure that the endoscope is positioned where we want it. And this is a horse we did just a few weeks ago over here in Weber Arena. So the horse is cantering around the arena, and here's his upper airway that we're able to watch and see if he does anything abnormal with his throat. Okay. This is a horse that I had done surgery on that was making a noise post-surgery. Not as much as he was beforehand, but it was still undesirable. And so he wasn't, they were unable to identify anything at resting endoscopy, but they instrumented this horse with the same system that we're going to demonstrate. And what you can see is when this horse is, during inspiration, this vocal cord hangs into the airway, and then that one does not. So this is where the noise is coming from, and you can actually, you can hear the horse making the noise, and you can see exactly what's going on when he's making the noise, and the system has a recording device to where you can sort of be coupled. Okay? So this is a vocal cord paralysis, and that's a horse where we went in and removed that vocal cord. You can also see the same thing on a treadmill. This is one, if you'll watch this horse, here's his vocal cords, and he's starting to gallop on the treadmill now. And what happens is you'll see that on every inspiration, the vocal cords get sucked into the airway. So the negative pressure that occurs during inspiration sucks paralyzed structures into it, and when they are in the airway, it catches air and vibrates and makes a noise. Okay. Other conditions that you're only going to diagnose at exercise, this is one called pharyngeal collapse. And let's see, I'm going to back up a slide or two. So take note. So here's the airway, or here's the whole nasopharynx, the back of your throat, and then here's the opening to the trachea. And on this horse, what we're going to see is as he starts exercising, these walls are going to collapse. So there's the opening. Can you see the sides of his throat coming in together? So you won't be able to see that unless the horse is actually performing. So that's that condition called pharyngeal collapse. Okay. Another thing that we might see with the dynamic endoscope, this is a normal epiglottis, and this is an epiglottis right here that's entrapped by this fold. That fold is supposed to be there, but it's just supposed to be underneath the epiglottis. And so this is a horse, and that entrapment can be intermittent. So on this particular horse, we're sitting here scoping him, and he's going to swallow. Oops, he's entrapped. And now that entrapment's going to fall off. And so if you see that entrapment in place at rest, you have your diagnosis, but it's a condition that can be intermittent. It may only entrap during exercise. Another common condition, and this may be as prevalent as that 40 to 50% of all racehorses will have some degree of this, dorsal displacement of the soft palate. So horses are not like us. They can't breathe through their mouth. They have a complete separation between their nose and their mouth. And so they have to breathe through their nose. And the only condition under which they can breathe through their mouth is if they have the dorsal displacement of the soft palate. So here's our epiglottis. If a horse swallows and flips that epiglottis down into the mouth, we now break that seal, and so that horse can breathe out of his nose or his mouth. And what happens is that during intense exercise, air goes in smoothly, but as the air comes out of the trachea and then hits this back edge of the palate, it'll cause that palate to vibrate, and the air gets split. Some of it comes out the nose, some of it comes out the mouth, and you'll see their cheeks start to flutter. And so this is actually a normal finding. So we're down a horse's trachea right now with the scope, and as we pull the scope out and into the nasopharynx, what we're going to see is it just tickles the horse's throat, and he's going to displace his palate. So he's displaced right now. Now he's going to swallow and replace the palate. Okay? So that's normal if they do it once after going down the trachea and then replace it with one swallow. But here's another horse. And what we're doing on this horse is we're holding off his air to simulate the negative pressures. And you'll see he's going to start leaking air right along the sides. And that air breaking that seal is going to cause a noise like a person gargling. And we'll see that in performance horses, especially in horses that have an upright head carriage. You'll see it in hackneys, park pleasure horses, some dressage horses. And you can diagnose that with oftentimes get them exercising out here with their head set, start making the noise, let the reins out just 1 finger length, and that much change in the head position is enough to make the noise go away. Pull the head back up, the noise occurs. And that, when you see that scenario, that's usually what's happening, is that it's not completely displacing, but it's just breaking that seal, and then they're leaking air. So this horse, we're gonna hold off his airway and make him struggle to breathe, and he's going to have, he has such a flimsy epiglottis that he's not able to resist the negative airway pressures, and boom, he just flips his palate there, and you can see it vibrating on exhalation. Every time he exhales, that palate vibrates and makes an expiratory noise. This is another horse that we scoped recently. So this horse is right here at a walk. Here's his epiglottis, and he's going to start trotting here in a moment, and he'll take several breaths, and then eventually he's going to displace his palate. So right now everything's still normal, epiglottis is still on top. That's his tongue pushing the palate up, is that thing that's bouncing there. And pretty quickly here, he's going to displace. Okay, there he's displaced. So he swallowed, and the epiglottis is now underneath his palate, down in his mouth, and you'll see that vibrating, and all that vibration occurred with exhalation. And so this is the most commonly a racehorse condition, but other breeds and other uses of horses do get it. And a horse that's at a gallop or a standardbred that's on the track absolutely cannot perform. So once they do this, if you were watching the race, you would see 10 horses going along together, and the trainers describe it as what they say, backed through the pack. All of a sudden you'll see one horse fade to the rear and just get smoked. They'll actually have to stop and start walking, because this causes so much resistance to expiration that they're unable to sustain exercise.
Can you fix that? Is that
There are
maybe not for excessive use, but is it a fixable situation that?
in many instances it can be fixed or managed, not all of them. So what we have here now is Callie's riding this horse instrument. If y'all or anyone would like to see, here's the monitor that we have. And so we were watching